And it wasn't until later on, that I started when I was watching news with my dad, I realized that actually my neighborhood was burning around me and didn't understand it. But the way that my neighborhood was talked about, it was as if it was like the poster child for urban blight. And I saw this on the national news. And it was a really troubling moment for me to realize like, wait, they're talking about the same thing that, I go outside and play in. And because I didn't quite understand what was going on. And then it literally hit home. The year I turned 8, at the beginning of the summer, both buildings on the either end of my block burned down, which meant that the people who were there were all gone. And then at the end of the summer, my brother was killed as a result of the drug wars that happened around. And so between the arson that happened because of the financial disinvestment in the community, like redlining and, in particular, um, it was just, I got to see this and, in my little 8-year-old mind, I didn't understand what was going on, but I knew that what I really wanted was to get out of the neighborhood, despite the fact that I felt like there was still much love and, uh, yeah, there was a lot of love and community within my own community, but I felt like I couldn't stay there.
Was there a specific moment where you had this revelation? Well, first, that your community, the way they talk about it in the news, was there like, do you have a core memory that you remember that it just hit you? And then another memory maybe where you've immediately made the decision that I have to get out of it.
Yeah, the actual time, because seeing it on the news was just, it still felt like it was a little bit away and it was more confusion
Yeah.
actually, rather than like, wait a second, like what's going on? But, when my brother was killed, and I went back to school, after the summer was over, and realized that kids in my class, they were about to leave because their parents, were able to take them out and move to a whole other neighborhood. It was just kind of like, yeah, no, that's kind of when it started to happen. When I realized I'm in school, I'm really smart. Um, I can get out of here, and I will, and it's just a matter of time. And I hadn't even turned 8 at that point, at that moment, but
Yeah.
I knew I had to get out.
Can you talk about the spirit of the people of Bronx back in the 70s? What was the prevailing sentiment, the zeitgeist? Were people hopeful? Were they dreamers? Or did you get a sense of there's a feeling of hopelessness or feeling of defeat in the air?
No, I mean, this is the fascinating part of it, right? Because the South Bronx and the Bronx in general, we lost 60% of the population from the late 60s almost into the 80s as a result of all the financial disinvestment, the fact that there was so much arson and just buildings falling into disrepair because of the just because of the old building stock that wasn't being invested in.
Mhm.
And then there was definitely, the influx of drugs. There was like lack of services being brought into the neighborhood as well. It was tough. So those things were real, and it did make people feel kind of horrible. However, those of us that were still there, like my dad, owned our house like outright. And the houses weren't worth much, so we couldn't sell it and buy something else. Right, we were stuck right exactly where we were. And
Yeah.
again, I was a kid; I didn't fully understand that, but our house actually became this space for lots of people, to find a home, and not just the 6 kids that my parents raised there. But people, there was always people coming over to our house, whether it was for a day or a while, because it was a big place. And it was one of those things where I got to see, love in our community because people stuck together
Yeah.
because we kind of had to. If we were there, we were there. And so like I like honestly will never forget like my brother's funeral. He was well loved, my family was well loved, and the the number of people that showed up, it's just like it giving nothing but love for our family and concern, and it may be in part because it could have happened to any of them, right? But everybody wanted us to know that they were there for us,
Mhm.
and I distinctly remember that, in ways that just always remind me that despite of what the kind of things that we saw presented or heard about and even believed on our own, that our neighborhood was a terrible place sometimes. You also could not escape the fact that there was so much love.
Yeah, of course.
You just couldn't. And it was just like, duh, of course. You like seriously. And those are the things I remember, which is why I think the first things that I think about,
Yeah.
is not, honestly, my brother's murder was when my brother was alive. And, and I was riding on his handlebars, around the neighborhood, or, jumping double dutch with my friends in the street. And, those are are being like watched over, by the adults in the neighborhood who just wanted to make sure that like we knew that as kids, they were being watched by older adults just to support them. And, things like that made me not hate my neighborhood